Board meeting of June 18th, 2018 at 7 p.m. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Deputy Clerk Niza, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti?
Here.
Trustee Anderson?
Here.
Treasurer LaFata?
Here.
Trustee Joseph?
Here.
Trustee Vosper?
Here.
I'll make a motion to excuse Clerk Berry and Trustee Demink.
Support.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Clerk Berry and Trustee Demink are excused. Deputy Clerk Niza, you can refrain from calling their names from roll call votes. Item 4, presentations. 4A, presentation by the Macomb County Public Works Commissioner, Candace Miller, and her team regarding the ownership of the North Gratiot Interceptor from 21 Mile to 25.5 Mile Road.
Good evening. I just wanted to start us off by saying this is a section of sewer pipe that's been in service since the early 80s, and there is an agreement that Chesterfield will take this pipe over. It's known as the NGI, or North Gratiot Interceptor, and Commissioner Miller, Candace Miller, would like to speak on it, and anything else we can do to help.
Welcome, Commissioner Miller.
Thanks so much. I can't tell you how absolutely delighted I am to be here as an old township trustee, not old, long time ago, township trustee and township supervisor in Harrison Township. It takes me back to my township board days. So dealing with local issues, there really is nothing more impactful, I think, on all of our local residents, and roads and drains and ditches and what we're doing with underground that does impact them. We put together a packet that you all have there, the blue packet that's in front of you. And our guy, I think you all know Tony Ferlini, a former state rep, represented this area. He works for me now at the Public Works, and we call him the drain man. He's out in all the drains, and he's done a number of, his team through our office have done a number of drain work projects in Chesterfield Township, and we put together I thought I'd just touch on this since we're here talking about the sewer pipe, but since I happen to be in front of the Township Board and some of the residents here, I thought would be interested in some of the different drain works that we've done here. And if you look at the map, we've been all over Chesterfield Township. In fact, we've been really all over Macomb County, but we've done quite a bit here in Chesterfield Township. There's a couple of pictures here of the Fuller drain, which is literally outside the township offices here, which you can you see. And the thing, of course, was very overgrown, and all kinds of debris and woody debris that was in the drain, and just generally a lack of maintenance for decades, probably. One of the Public Works drains here, and the supervisor contacted our office, and we agreed to proceed with the drain project. And now, of course, you can see your beautiful historic area that you have here, and perhaps even open up that drain for some sort of waterway activity or what have you. The thing that we found with our drain cleanouts all over the county is so many areas where people had put up fences or whatever just to protect themselves from having to look at these overgrown drains. Now they are aesthetically beautiful, really. They're beautiful. And they can be, and they can really be an asset and help with property values, et cetera. So we've got a couple of other pages of some pictures there. Tony was unable to be here tonight, but he gave us a couple of different pictures here. What we've done, we have a drain maintenance crew that for the last number of decades, not to say too much, but they weren't doing much drain maintenance work. They were doing other things. But now we have them in the drains doing what they're supposed to be doing. And in many cases, we have to hire a contractor to assist us. So we've been doing that in some of the drains here in Chesterfield Township. Then there's a page where it shows the Fish Creek East. That's another drain that we've been working at in Chesterfield Township. What happened in this case, this is just an example. I mean, we've done a lot of these all over, but I mean, here is a property owner's backyard, which is literally falling into the drain because of again, the drain's overgrown, the drain's not flowing properly, it erodes properties, and we've seen that many areas in Harrison and Chesterfield and Clinton Township and Macomb Township, Ray Township, Bruce Township, but this is one here in Chesterfield where we're trying to clean it out. And again, you can see sort of the before and after of this as well. And in Chesterfield Township now, as we go to the last slides on the drains here, we actually have done almost $50,000 worth of drain work here. Some of it has been matched by this board, almost $10,000, which you have agreed to spend out of your township funds. And I think the board did exactly the right thing. That's very appropriate expenditures. In that case, what we've done, actually, I went to the Board of Commissioners last year as a new commissioner, and I said, you know, these drains are in such bad shape all over the county, and we just don't have enough funds. If we could incent the local communities, perhaps to match, we could go make our money go a lot further. Plus, they know the bad drains, and let them help us here with this. So it was a 50-50 match. And again, some of this Chesterfield Township has matched, and other areas we've just used our own funds that where we've identified some funds in a particular drain account that happens to be in your community. So we just wanted to sort of set the play here tonight by telling you the good news. So that's all to the good, and we're very excited with that. We look forward to continuing with that. With our drain maintenance projects. And again, we're all over the place, and I know we have some more here in Chesterfield that are going on. But tonight we're here to talk about what we call the Chesterfield Arm. That's what we call it in our office. It's a sewer that runs from 25.5 mile to 21 mile road. And essentially, it was built back in 1988. And at that time, Chesterfield Township came to, okay, now you get your slide up there, 6.73 miles of gravity sewer. I'm just going to talk a little bit here, and then I'm going to have each one of my team go through this. We don't want to spend too much of your time, but this is a very important issue, and it could be, it will be an expensive issue for Chesterfield Township, so we want to give you as much information as we can about it. So in 1988, Chesterfield Township came to the Macomb County Drain Commission, it was called at that time, to help finance and build a sewer, which is a common thing that we see throughout the county, because of course if the county can help with the financing, we can get the full faith and credit, as Trustee Vosberg knows very well, of the County Board of Commissioners, which helps a lot with the interest rates on the bond issues, etc. So it was built, and there was an agreement in 2003 that Chesterfield Township actually requested as well, basically saying that the township wanted ownership now of this particular asset when there were a couple of things that happened. One was when the bonds were paid off, which actually happened in 2007. And then the other criteria that Chesterfield Township requested as well is have an inspection. They wanted to have, you wanted to have an inspection done, of course, to understand exactly what kind of asset you were transferring back into your ownership here. And in this case, both of those things have happened because my office actually received a SAW grant, a state grant, and we did an inspection. We used your engineering firm, AEW, to do the inspection of this pipe. And some of the issues that were found during the inspection, which I'm going to have our construction engineer talk about in just a moment here, are critical, quite frankly. They need quick attention. Bad enough, and he's going to show you some pictures, and he'll go back through this when he's talking. But bad enough that, you know, they have a rating for criticality in interceptors or in pipes and sewer pipes from 1 to 5, 5 being very bad. I mean bad. And you have some 4s and some 5s in this pipe. So we need to think about, we don't want to have a sinkhole, of course, nor would we want to have sewage backing up into people's basements. So, you know, look, this is not particularly inherent to this particular pipe. Underground infrastructure all over the country is outliving its life expectancy and it needs maintenance. And we want to make sure that we're doing that properly. So what we need now to complete the transfer of the ownership of this pipe, which, and I'm going to point this out several times, this pipe is only used by residents in Chesterfield Township. So there's no other community that is using this particular gravity flow pipe. It's only Chesterfield Township. So to begin with some of the details here as far as the legality of this, I had a chance to talk a little bit to your legal counsel before we started here, and he remembers some of the agreements, and some he doesn't, and some we thought we knew, and some we're finding. But we're gonna make sure we get everything out on the table here. And so to speak to sort of the background with the different agreements with the legal contracts and what they entail, I'm going to ask Joe Viviano to speak, who's our Corp Counsel for the Public Works Department. When he's done, rather than getting up and popping up and down, when he's done, I will then have Brian Baker, who's my Chief Deputy, speak to you about funding that we have identified within the Public Works Department that we are prepared to transfer to Chesterfield Township. And he's going to talk about $628,000 that has been sitting in the Public Works Department for about 40 years. Okay, maybe it wasn't quite that high at one time with interest, et cetera. It's gone. This is from water mains that were built in Chesterfield Township decades ago. So this money should be spent in Chesterfield Township for a good project, and we're suggesting that this is going to be a good one. Brian will talk about that. And then when Brian Baker, my Chief Deputy, is done talking about the finances and what we are prepared to help you with, I'm going to ask Evans Bantios, who is our construction engineer, our lead construction engineer in the Public Works, and he does an excellent job. You can thank him for much of what happened at the sinkhole on 15 Mile Road there. And he's going to talk to you about what the inspection has found and the criticality of the assessment that we found, degradation on the pipe, and some of the various things that we think need to have happen there. So let me start with Joe Viviano.
Good evening, everybody. I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes. Feel free to interrupt with any questions I can help out with. Really, this is one piece of a massive look at everything in the office that Commissioner Miller is doing to try to make sure assets are titled in the right name as they were supposed to be. One correction from the introduction to this pipe is not actually the North Gratiot Interceptor. It runs parallel to it. It's a technical point, and I think they did the drain law to make full employment for lawyers like Mr. Siebert and I, because it's very confusing. But the North Gratiot Interceptor is a Chapter 4 drainage district. It's administered by the Public Works Commissioner. Running next to it is this pipe, which is actually an Act 342 piece of infrastructure owned by the county, also administered by the Public Works Commissioner, but I just wanted to clear that up. And the confusion is very understandable because this issue arises in what was called the North Gratiot Interceptor Settlement Agreement in 2003. That agreement provided for the construction of the NGI in 5 different phases. And then as part of the agreement, there's a paragraph in it that says Chesterfield requests title to this particular pipe to pass to Chesterfield Township. It's not terribly unusual from what we are seeing for long ago, the county to finance Act 342 infrastructure for local communities. Usually when the bonds are paid off, there's a transfer back. That didn't happen here, so the bonds were paid off in 2007. In 2003, and if you don't have the agreement, Mr. Siebert, I'm happy to give you a copy of it. You have it. So in 2003, the agreement set forth various conditions that would be met, and then there was an agreement that the pipe would be transferred back. And condition 1 was that phase 2 of the North Gratiot Interceptor would be complete. That has happened long since. Number 2 is that the bonds would be paid off. That happened in 2007. Number 3, that there would be an inflow and infiltration study. That did occur, and that's what identified a lot of these issues that Mr. Bantios is going to talk about. Number 4, there's a small piece of this that's an inflow, infiltration, remediation contract. It's about a $9,000 contract. The county agreed to do that, and it's going to do that in the near future. So that condition will be satisfied. And then there was sort of an open term about approval of terms covering operation, maintenance, and emergency use. So in consultation with our engineering department, we think that means, number 1, we would like to operate what is known as the Fontaine Model 204 sluice gate. That allows flow to enter the Chesterfield Interceptor from the North Gratiot pump station. So our engineers would like to operate that gate, and we would Mr. Siebert and I would work out terms on some type of emergency use, which our engineers tell me would be via gravity flow through the connection on the northern end of the Chesterfield interceptor. So in order to get this done, there's already an agreement in 2003 relating to this transfer. I think it would be a very good idea for everyone concerned, for Mr. Siebert and I, to do this in a cleaner, nicer agreement where we're going to transfer the asset on an as-is basis. There's not going to be money changing hands. That would be the first part of this. Then the second part of this, Mr. Baker is going to talk about the money, but there would be some resolution of this board for us to approve, even though it's in the Public Works Commissioner's office. We would like, and I think that we require a resolution from this board saying we consent to you spending this money or transferring it to Chesterfield, however the case may be with the $600,000. So I will take any questions. I think on the legal side, I'm envisioning a simple 3 or 4 page, asset transfer agreement, and then Mr. Siebert and I working together to do whatever has to happen to shake loose the $600,000 for the township to use on this work that has to happen.
I think we'll wait to the end to bring up
Sure.
the board for questions if we
Okay.
can. Thank you.
Good evening. They saved me for the good news. So as Candace said, that we have found about $628,000, and that's leftover Act 342 funds that we can direct toward this project. And the funds are left over from 4 wastewater, wastewater and sanitary sewer projects that this office finished and did on your behalf back in the 1970s. And a small portion, about $100,000 or so, is left over from the installation of this pipe that we're talking about today in 1988, the pipe that needs work. As has been said, all the bonds have been paid off. The projects are completed, and as you'll notice, the $628,000 has grown with interest over time, so that is what it totals right now. And these funds are available to you upon request and also upon formalizing the needed transfer agreement. So with that, I will now bring up our engineer who can talk about what they found on the asset condition and work that's needed. Thanks.
So we had AEW do a SAW investigation of the interceptor back in 2017. The state gave us $580,000. I think we paid 10% of that. So we got pretty much free money from the state to do the investigation that I'm going to be discussing. One of the aspects of that was to do an infiltration and inflow study. The biggest concern with this pipe was that there was excess flow coming in, and we thought it was from the various joints within the pipe, but the investigation proved that it was coming from the local sewer, not from this pipe. Not that this pipe has any, it's watertight, but the majority of the flow is coming from the local connections into the pipe. Also, as part of that investigation, we did a CCTV investigation of the interceptor, as well as the manholes, to determine the condition of the manholes. Closed caption TV. So basically what they do is they send a camera into the sewer and they record the condition of the pipe, and then they provide a grade to the pipe based on the condition at the time of the observation. So 1 is good, 5 is bad. In the next slide, we encountered roughly 15,000 feet of pipe that had a structural rating of 4 or 5. That requires us to line the pipe, and that is that requires us to move the flow out of the area, clean the pipe, and then line it with a liner that will provide you another 20 to 40 years of life of the pipe. The rest of the pipe had some issues, but the majority of the issues are not of a major concern that requires any immediate action. There's two additional sections of pipe that have leaks that the county has to take care of, and those were determined as part of the investigation. Next slide. Here are a couple examples of the pipe condition. As you can see, the walls of the pipe are been eaten away by the H2S in the pipe, and you can actually see some of the aggregate missing, some of the aggregate exposed. It's a little better to see on the handout, but the next slide. This is another section of pipe. And then third one. Another section. As you can see, there has been some infiltration, that joint right there where there's incrustation coming through. That pipe right there has had infiltration at one point, but now it appears to have stopped. So, next slide. So basically, at the end of the day, we have to line the pipe, and the AW report indicated that that cost would be roughly $1.7 million. That's a budgetary number, and there would have to be further analysis to determine the actual cost of that. The county is required to take care of 2 leaks on 2 sections of pipe and reset a manhole frame. Next slide. As Brian stated earlier, there is money that can be used to help offset the cost, roughly $628,000. And the issue that we have is moving forward, when this pipe gets transferred, this pipe will still continue to degrade. So it's not like we can wait for an extended period of time to do this work. It still needs to happen, because if we do get a collapse here, even though it's a smaller pipe, there's still the chance of, if that pipe collapses, you're going to back up flow into the local system, and eventually, if it's not handled, taken care of immediately, you can back it up into basements. So there's going to need to be a lot of work in the area. Any questions? Yeah.
So we're all here. You can ask any of us any question that you might have. And one of the things, as Evans was going through here, he says, this is what we need to do, saying we. Really, it's, I'll just say this, it's really Chesterfield Township. So that's one of the things you have to decide, and you should. I mean, we're trying to transfer this pipe, which it needs to go by all the contracts, to Chesterfield Township. Really, we could do the work, but then we would have to charge you administrative costs. So I want you to all think about that as well. I mean, really, it's going to be your pipe that really wouldn't be any different than any neighborhood sewer, you know, or what have you. So that's one thing to think about a bit as well. But any questions for our legal team, our engineer, myself?
A quick statement from me. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time and bringing your team here tonight, and just the work you've done so far on the drains, and picking up pieces that are tying up loose ends that aren't untied, that haven't been tied. This agreement's been in place since 2003. That's 15 years. The NGI Phase 2 with the pump station and the dual force mains, which alleviated New Haven and Lenox, has been done for quite some time. And this agreement has been an untied loose end at the county and, frankly, for our community, along with the 600 and some odd $1,000 that's on our books. Mm-hmm. That was one of the questions I immediately asked 18 months ago, and it was, where is it? What is it? It's the Drain Commission, and unsorting that takes time. All this does. So these are loose ends, legacy issues that go back decades. And thank you so much. And I might have more questions as we progress, and I'll bring it up to the board first. Trustee Joseph.
Thank you. I have a number of questions, and they're like sort of spread out among the team. If I could just start by saying thanks for the presentation. I really appreciated the diplomacy when you talked about the drain cleanout, and for decades work has not been done, and you said they were doing, I don't know, other things. So that was nice. And it is nice to get a report from your office that doesn't involve, you know, keeping your hand on your wallet as you hear the presentation. So I think that the residents should be comforted in knowing that the presentation we get is exactly what the problem is. And that's, you know, nobody likes to pay more money, but if it can't be avoided because it's what we owe, then that's what we have to do. The questions that I had, I think maybe diminished a bit because all of them, well, most of them centered around the idea that this was the North Gratiot interceptor, and I heard in part of the presentation it actually
it is not. No.
So the questions that I had, and are our people aware of that, that this is not, because the confusion comes in when you look at the mid and you look at the cost associated with our portion of mid property or mid assets. The natural question would be, well, we've been paying for system upgrades and depreciation. Why would we get this asset back with $1.7 million in repairs needed? Wouldn't it have already been covered? And the short answer is no, because it's not part of the, it is exclusively Chesterfield.
That's correct. It is exclusively Chesterfield Township. It's not part of the NGI.
Okay, so the few that I had were the estimate that was done by AEW, 1.7. Is that would you consider that to be a fairly thorough estimate, or is that sort of...
Do you want to answer that question? Evans, you can take a picture later. Brian, take a picture.
That number is a budgetary number. It's pretty close, but it's not, you know, they put that number together based on historical projects of similar size pipe, similar size depth. There would have to be an engineering design, and then they can determine a more accurate price.
So typically when we get an estimate for a project, it usually costs us quite a bit of money to get, you know, a full sort of breakdown. We haven't got to that point yet.
No.
Okay.
This is based on historical data from other projects of other similar pipe. So it's like I said, it's in the ballpark, and it's probably, I don't want to give you a percentage, but you know, it's probably 20-30% one way or the other.
Okay.
So.
Plus it depends on how much you're going to do, right?
Right.
That's really for the whole thing. And again, some of it is, as you mentioned, really doesn't have to be done in the immediacy, so that's something that you'd have to decide how much of it you really, I mean, if you have areas that are rated 4 and 5, obviously you need to look at doing those, so I'm not sure how much that would be.
I see.
But you'll have to have your engineers go through and make a recommendation of really what needs to be addressed and give you a better idea of the price.
So the other questions that I had were one was the engineering also. Is there a redundancy capability here? Is there a way to take this parallel portion of ours and sort of connect directly to the NGI while the repairs are being done? What has to happen in order to, if you were to do like a full repair with the existing line, what do you do in the interim?
So the current flow would have to be bypassed with either pumping or some other way. The engineer would figure that out. The nice thing that we do have is the NGI, and we could theoretically bypass pump into those sewers. It's actually two 20-inch diameter force mains. So theoretically, we could bypass flow for sections through there where it's close. But currently, there is no redundancy for the local flow coming into this 27-inch line.
Okay. Last question is what makes this an asset? So it's referred to as an asset. We borrowed, used the county as the mechanism for getting this built many years ago, and the expectation is once the bond is paid off, then the responsibility for the maintenance and the so forth then becomes the responsibility of the township. What makes it an asset? The fact that we can collect fees for the sanitation? What makes it an asset? Because it seems very liability heavy to me.
There is liability there, but an asset in regards to having sanitary sewers in your township provides you the opportunity to develop in the township, therefore bringing in tax dollars and whatnot. So they refer to it as an asset only in that regard. That
Cost of doing business, so to speak. You
Well,
can't really
yeah,
attract business
I
if you
mean,
can't take care of their sanitary
most developers
needs.
want to have water and sanitary so they can tie directly in instead of having to build their own facilities to take care of that. So.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm sorry, last one was a comment. I really did appreciate the work done by your office with the updated correspondence. For those of us that aren't familiar with this, we got a memorandum back in April from Mr. Viviano's office explaining a history of the Macomb Interceptor drain and the relationship to Act 342, along with, I think, if I remember right, Article 20, and the distinctions between the two and what that all means moving forward. It was a very helpful, and I appreciate, review and synopsis. Again, for those of us that don't know this, really did a great job of putting it all together to make it a little more understandable.
We
So thank you
appreciate
for
that. One of the things I think hopefully will be a hallmark of this administration is transparency and accountability. And a big part of transparency is making sure that your customers, right, understand exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it, et cetera. And one other thing, since we're just talking here a bit, we are we've just let a contract for a countywide master plan for our underground. So your Public Works office will be shortly receiving a survey from our team that we've selected. We, of course, open bid, everything is now openly bid and awarded on very good criteria. And so we're going to be surveying every community in Macomb County, quite frankly, trying to get all the information that we can, the data of what kind of systems that you have here, et cetera. And so we're looking at, of course, the Macomb Interceptor Drainage District, which is 11 Macomb County communities. We have another large drainage district, which we call the 8.5 Mile District, which is Roseville, East Point, St. Clair Shores. And in the northern part of our county, we don't have a drainage district up there, and some of the folks are thinking about building their own individual little sanitary operations, which is not really in our best interest, I think. So we'll be looking at that as well. And, one of the things that I know many of us think about when we drive sometimes on roads in the county, we think, gosh, was there ever a master plan for this? I mean, all this congestion, et cetera. Same thing goes for underground. And this county has never had a underground master plan. And we're embarking on that now, and you're going to be a critical component of it. We're going to ask for your input and all the way steps along there of what we're up to, so we think about what we need to do for the future of our county.
Thank you.
Treasurer LaFata.
I have a couple of questions. When Chesterfield requested ownership of this section of drain from 21 to 25.5 Mile Road, I didn't think they realized that when they were going to get possession of it, they're going to get a $1.7 million repair bill along with it. It's quite a bit for Chesterfield to have to spend on this. The other question I have is we write the county checks for about $358,000 every month. A big portion of it's for Great Lakes Water for sewage treatment, but the rest of it goes to the county. And I'm just curious if any of these payments should have gone to some of the repairs for this section of pipe that's in the ground.
Brian, I'm going to ask you to come up and address that question. Brian Baker, my chief deputy, also serves as the Macomb County representative to the Great Lakes Water Authority. That was a part of the deal when they made the authority. And in our county, the representative is appointed by Mark Hackle. And Mark Hackle appointed Brian Baker because every community in Macomb County asked him to appoint Brian Baker. So it's good that he's in my department, I think, right now. It's a real good fit. But anyway, you can address that.
I think so.
Good questions. The Chesterfield Interceptor is not part of the MID and therefore is not part of the Great Lakes Water Authority. I think in 1988, this board asked for a return of the pipe, and one of the conditions was an inspection on the pipe. So they also wanted to make sure there weren't any issues with the pipe, and that was part of the agreement, that we do an inspection. Speaking to the Great Lakes Water Authority, I have been the only one who's been voting against budgets last several years. Good news this year, it looks like proposed as of right now, it's about a 5% increase on sewer. I think your water might be 6%, but we are scheduled to vote on the budget finally on Wednesday, and I'll be calling for a 2% reduction for that. And I think we have the vote. So your sewer cost all in terms of what you're going to be paying on the wholesale side should be about 3% of an increase this year, and water about a 4%. So in terms of the history of the wild swings and fluctuations, it has certainly come down, but we're certainly not where we need to be in terms of the efficiencies that we should be there at Great Lakes Water Authority. We're not happy about the lease payment and all those things, and we have more work that we have to be doing, but it is at least an improvement over historically the Detroit Water and Sewer Department.
So
what is the makeup of the Great Lakes Water Authority Board, the different members?
Yes, so unfortunately, well, there's 5 members. Unfortunately, Detroit has 2 of the votes on the board. Wayne County has the other, so there's a natural block there of 3. And then Macomb has 1, and Oakland County has 1, and then the governor has an appointment who is outside of the local region, and he has since promised his appointment to the city of Flint, and they have not taken, they have not been appointed yet, but it's a board of 5, and there's certain pros and cons to it all. Macomb County was against the deal at the time because primarily we're paying the $50 million lease payment to have the luxury of operating it. And that could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, and we certainly haven't gotten $50 million of savings yet, but that is my goal, to keep achieving those savings, to lower these rates and lower the variability of the rate structure.
While you're up there, I have one other question. The $600 and some odd thousand, I remember emails about a year ago. This money was from like overpayments for projects that were completed?
It wasn't from overpayments. It was from funds that were not spent for the project.
Okay, but those funds, though, weren't they paid for by bond issues from the township?
Correct.
So actually it was for overpayments?
Whatever, you know,
Correct.
it's your money.
Basically,
And
if we paid the bond
We
amount.
don't want your money anymore.
Oh, I understand, but
and we shouldn't be doing that. It belongs to Chesterfield Township.
But basically, it's bond money that wasn't spent because the projects were under budget.
Correct.
From what I understand.
Correct. Under budget.
It's
Correct.
not like free money coming to the township.
I just want to address one thing that you said, because you said that you wouldn't.
If you could go up to the microphone.
You said that you wouldn't have requested this back if you had known about these issues. Obviously, Commissioner Miller is totally transparent. We're here telling you about the issues. But it's kind of a moot point. It's a solely Chesterfield pipe. If it's an Act 342 and you need it, you'd be paying for it anyway. So I don't want you to feel badly about the fact that you're taking it back, because then you have to pay for it. If you didn't take it back and you wanted it in service, you still would have to pay for it. So I wanted to address that point with you. One other clarification in the letter that our group noticed, I don't think we've made this clarification yet, but the pipe goes northeast and then it juts to the east. The part of it that juts to the east is not part of the asset transfer. That's actually, I think, going to become part of the mid. But I think I read the letter today and we were talking about it, and the letter says it goes north and then it goes east to the New Haven, I think, border there, I think, wherever, sorry. But the part of it that goes to the east is not part of what's being transferred. I just want to clarify that.
That'll be clarified in the legal agreement you guys come up with. It'll be very clear of exactly what it is.
Trustee Vosberg.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor, and thank you all for your contribution to this presentation. What determined, on page 15, there's the estimated cost of $1.7 million. and then 10,000 of that appears to be the responsibility of Public Works. What determines who's responsible for what part of that?
Well, first of all, the SAW grant, which I think you all have a copy of that, which is a very big document, but the SAW inspection, excuse me, it goes through and tells you everything that, the construct of the $1.7 million, I suppose. This is the thing. This is what your engineer, the AEW, is suggesting, is recommending, needs to be done to bring the pipe up to speed. As I say, you're going to have to decide on what exactly, what part of that you want to undertake. Some you have to, some you don't have to. But here's the thing. It's only used by Chesterfield Township. So as far as what the Public Works, is that your question?
If I can interrupt to make it... Yeah.
Okay, make it a little clearer.
So how is 10,000 of that yours then, and not all of it ours?
Do you know? Okay.
I'm not positive of this, but I suspect it's this. If you look at the conditions for the transfer of the pipe, one of them is that we had to carry out a remediation contract.
Oh, right.
I had the number 9,000 in my head, but maybe that's the 10,000? Okay, so that's...
Well, it's 9,000 for the infiltration, 1,000 for the manhole frame.
That's because we agreed to do it in that 2003 agreement. That's why.
Okay.
And we will pay that.
So it's just completion of that agreement?
Completion of the agreement, which... It was the completion of the agreement, which was to take care of the infiltration in the pipe and then handle any issues associated with that. So the two leaks are the infiltration that exceeds the standards for the pipe, and then the frame also has infiltration because there's a crack and it's letting flow come in. So
okay, thank you. I just thought if there's some more way we could put more of the costs on you, but still, it's all our costs. It's still the taxpayers' dollars. And I have one other question, and that I guess that's more toward us and to bring back to accounting and bookkeeping. Should we be then billing the cost of this, the Chesterfield Interceptor, into our bills to our customers? Has that been something we've been factoring all along? I don't know. And if you don't know the answer, that's fine, but we'll have to look at that.
It's a bigger discussion for another time as to water rate setting, if we're, what rates we're paying, what capital improvement plans are in those rates, and that's probably not a discussion for right now.
I was just curious if that had been part of the rate setting before. It had not?
No, it has not.
Okay, all right, thank you, that's all.
Trustee Anderson.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yeah, first thing, Mrs. Miller and your department, grateful for the work you've done on the drains. You know, that's been complaints I've got from some of our residents is these drains have become dumping grounds, and they look pristine and clean. Just out here, I'm really aware that there was a drain out here. It was a nice little forest area. In the past, we'd ask about it and get answers like, well, that's natural. The trees fall in and you can't remove them. I guess that was a good story, but thank you for the work there. Mr. Baker, thanks for being a voice in the wilderness with Detroit Water and the Sewer Board there. Thank you for representing us. And the final question I have, I think Mr. Joseph did a good job volley on them, on the questions. The township takes ownership of this drain, the $628,000 plus dollars. Is there any other strings attached to that amount of money that, hey, whoops, you only get so much, or if the engineering and repairs are less than that or more than that, or if the decision is made to do the repairs maybe in a series instead of all at once, will the township still be able to get that amount of funding?
It's your money. I wanted to make sure you were aware that we were holding your money, and we don't want to hold your money. Although we have to agree. I mean, it's sort of your money, but it's sort of our money. But we would have to agree on what you wanted to spend it on, right? So, I mean, I think this is a perfect project for this money, and I think our legal counsel, and what you would want to do, is probably pass a resolution saying, you know, that you agree to accept the transfer of this money. And I'll tell you that because we've done this in a couple of other communities where we have found other monies. All right, I just did a big storm sewer project in St. Clair Shores, and we used some leftover bond monies from the Lake St. Clair Clean Water Initiative 20 years ago. And which we found. I called the mayor down there and said, you know, I have some extra money here and we need to be cleaning out some of these storm drains. It's Lake St. Clair money, but anyway, so we had the city council, you know, they can pass a resolution. We'd ask you to do the same thing. We We did a similar kind of transfer of money that we found. I know this is crazy. I'm telling you, we're finding this money here. But that's what we're finding, along with all kinds of other things that I won't speak about publicly. But we're just trying to clean things up and get money back in the hands of where it needs to go for the projects that best help the entire communities. I'll just give you one more example since I'm talking about this. We found, interestingly enough, that the Public Works owns land. We have different parcels of land that were purchased years ago on different things. We have a piece of land that we are currently selling, since we're not supposed to be in the land business, I didn't think. It was not part of our mission. On Ryan Road by 19 Mile, very valuable piece of property that someone's going to develop now. Of course, we put it out, open bid, you know, auction, that kind of a thing. We own the northwest corner of M59 in Garfield, where Iafredi is staging right now while they're building M59. I mean, you can't get any more. That's the best location in Macomb County. That is owned by the Public Works. And so we intend to be selling that in the fall, as soon as Iafredi's done with doing M59. And all of that money, the proceeds, will go back into the MID, actually, which purchased that property 20 years ago. So we're just trying to sort of clean up some interesting things and get the money in the hands where it belongs. And how is the ratepayer or the our constituency best served?
Trustee Joseph for a follow-up.
We have 7% of that by current calculations, I suppose, as
We're
being part
putting
of
it all into the pot.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
not to
Yes.
keep going here, but since we're talking about, you know, the MID, after the Interceptor collapse, and we're currently doing a number of forensic kinds of things about that, but we then had our own inspection of the rest of the MID, which is 17 miles of additional pipe. And no surprise, we have found some issues. And so we need money to fix some of these things, because we cannot have another sinkhole anywhere. And so, you know, we sell some of these properties and do other kinds of things. We have some expense to look at. Again, nothing particularly inherent here. It's not as though, oh my gosh, there's underground infrastructure's got issues. It's all over the country like that. We just have to have the political will to fix it.
But, and again, not to beat the horse here, but it is a lot easier when you find these things if you're not burdened with a not so transparent office. And so historically, you know, found money was never, you know, really lost, and projects that all of a sudden need to be, you know, those kinds of things happened, and they were just sort of like, oh, here we go again. And that's not the case here. So I really do appreciate that. It makes it easier. What makes it difficult is it's a complicating issue, and spending the amount of time I did with this memorandum that you laid out, and then go and trying to get my hands on all of the, you know, Article 342, and then you make a conclusionary finding that it's really no longer even an issue under the current configuration. And so, as you can tell, Treasurer LaFata is pretty good with the numbers. And so in talking with him and saying, what did we spend on MID-related infrastructure, you know, like what was the township's portion, was what led up to a lot of the questions tonight. Because even in the presentation, and piggybacking on Trustee Vosberg's comments about, is this something that we have worked in? I've never, since I've been on the board, distinguished between this Chesterfield portion of the NGI. I didn't know there were two entities. It's never appeared in any of the infrastructure problems, and it's never appeared on our radar. It's all sort of been lumped in to the MID, and that's a problem, but it's an internal problem. We'll work it out here. All of the things that you addressed in your memorandum are really a non-issue, because this is solely a Chesterfield, some say asset, but a Chesterfield piece of property. So everything that needs to be done is really for our residents. How we've collected and how we need to collect, obviously we need some work to do some work here, but there really are no arguments about infrastructure being collected and, you know, contributed to the MID, and then we get this piece of, you know, asset back with all these problems. It's just been neglected in essence, and it hasn't shown up on our radar until your presentation tonight. Even the start off was, this is part of the NGI. It's not.
No, it's not.
Game changer for us.
So one thing I want to make sure you all recognize is that we are here to assist you in any way that we possibly can. So if there are any questions, whether it's a legal question, finance question, engineering question, you know, whatever, our entire team stands available at any time to give you more information as you're working your way through how you want to proceed here, and anything we can do, we want to.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Any
Chairman.
further questions from the board? Just a comment from me on direction. It's my intent, I know there's already been a little conversation with our attorney and your office and your attorney. I intend on directing Mr. Siebert to start conversations to get a preliminary draft of what that agreement would look like. And as always, the devil's in the details, and to start working through those issues. And it will come back to this board in the form of a resolution, an agreement, and get this behind us. One of the things that you said that really perked my ears was the master plan for underground infrastructure, specifically sanitary sewer. Lots of technology in the last 10, 20, 30 years. Since get the sewer out of your house, now maintain that underground infrastructure that should have a shelf life 50, 60, 70, 80 years, but that shelf life is only good if there's maintenance done on it. And not to mention the problem of how we did things in the 70s and 80s. Bring a sewer up to Lenox, Chesterfield, and New Haven, which this line was linked to the prison on 26 Mile, and it serviced those three communities. Now NGI2 comes, takes off the Lenox piece of that, and the New Haven piece of that, 100% services Chesterfield. The decisions that leaders made in the past, without that roadmap, without those that master plan, leads us owning an asset, and I do, for one, believe it is a tremendous asset. Providing sewer and water allows for good, responsible development and good on our environment and tax base and everything else. However, we have a 26-inch line or 27-inch line in a spot that we don't really need a 27-inch line on the northern end of that piece. In that master plan will stop us as a county from repeating these same mistakes again. In the 80s, big line was brought up I-94 to service a chunk of this, and that line maybe there's a 120-inch tube down by Joy Boulevard. It could have just as easily been a 120-inch or an 84-inch gravity line, and that master plan will go a long ways to solving all those problems. So I really commend you on that, and I look forward to working to get this one resolved, and that's my intent is to have our attorney work with your office very closely and get this behind us.
Okay, well, we really appreciate all of your time, and it is a complicated issue, I suppose, but we all got to work our way through it here and serve the public in the best way that we can. And I really appreciate your comments about the master plan. We are very excited about our master plan. It's going to allow for us to, I think, be able to talk to all of the communities of exactly what kind of growth that they're looking for, what kind of capacity they need, how we can accommodate everyone, and the savings in dollars by having a good plan is hard to measure sometimes, I think. So we do, even though we're a bit behind the 8 ball here in Macomb County, it's never too late to start, so that's what we're about. But thank you so much, and I look forward to your legal counsel talking to ours, and this will come back to the board in the form of a resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 4B, Public Safety Department to present new patrol officer candidate Nicholas Calandra for the oath of office. Director Kirsten.
No, there's like 8 heads.
Good evening, Board. I'd like to introduce Officer Nicholas Calandra as a new Chesterfield Township police officer. Nick, come on up here. Nick is a graduate of Macomb Community College and Macomb Community Basic Police Academy. He excelled through our process with thanks of Trustee Anderson, who sat on our oral panel. And with that being said, I would like to have the clerk administer the oath of office to him.
Deputy Clerk Nysen.
States and the Constitution of this state, and that I will faithfully perform the duties of the office of police officer in the town for the Township of Chesterfield, County of Macomb, and the State of Michigan, according to the best of your ability, so help me God. Congratulations.
Nick's younger brother's good fit his dad.
Congratulations, Nick. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard. 5 are department reports. We have a couple are actually scheduled. 5A, report on the Miller Court Pump Station. Director Coddington.
Good evening again. So we have a pump station over by Brandenburg, and it's the Miller Court Pump Station. I first want to say that this station, we knew it's been getting older. We have been nursing this station and putting Band-Aids on it for years. Very hard to get the parts for it. Well, in the last couple weeks, we lost complete service of the station, where our repair and construction crew worked around the clock to make sure we didn't back up any basements. We did not back up any basements, I'm happy to say. A little history on this station. It was built designed in '69 and built in '70. So it's been there a long time. It services a small district along the lake there, along Jefferson. Temporarily, we have a pump that we had in the garage in that station right now, servicing it, just one pump, and we're watching it very closely. At this point, myself and our new engineer, Mitch, and with the help from Dan and everybody else in our office, we are trying to compile information as fast as we can to get this project put together. We have, like I said, we have budgeted to do this work in this year's budget. So we were hoping to get the design and if it built before we came to this point, but this is where we're at. In the process of doing this, our new Vector that you all helped us with broke down in the middle of it too. That didn't help. We had assistance from Clinton Township one day and New Haven another day with their Vectors to help us try and get everything running in here. I did want to just thank personally the guys on the crew that worked their butts off to make sure we didn't back up any basements, and that is Gary Moore, Jay Neerink, Matt Bermish, Dale Backers, Kyle Koselik, John Bettinger, and Joe Biskner. Them guys worked their butts off to make sure we did not back up any sewers, and believe me, it's not a fun job working in the sewers. So with that, we are working diligently to compile information. Me and Mitch hope to come back to this board by the first meeting in July with way more information on how we can move forward with this station. Is there any questions at this time?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Kirsten to discuss.
Thank you again. I'd like to report to the board, as I had requested back in January of this year, the two older fire trucks, the 2003 and 2004 Pierce pumpers, were sold recently to a municipality in Pennsylvania. The vehicles are now out of our inventory and they've been removed from our insurance policy. Any questions on that? Secondly, in regards to our police department annual report, which we publish, it is out, it is available. I put it in each of your mailbox. It will be up on our website within this week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director. Any further departments wish to speak to the board?
Good evening. I wanted to give a brief update on the consulting engineering request for qualifications. A draft has been emailed for review and comment. We expect the project to be advertised in late June. We'll receive proposals in late July, early August. They will be reviewed, and then a recommending body will present information to this board, probably for an August award.
Questions from the board? Trustee Vosper.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment. I did a preliminary run-through of it. I was very pleased with it. It was well-written, easy to understand, because engineering is not something that some of the aspects that I didn't, but there's enough writing in it to, even if you don't understand all the technicalities, there's the proposal itself was written well, asking for various aspects of the bids and the considerations that we're asking of these companies. I appreciate that. I learned from just reading it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board. Two quick things. Just to reiterate, as Brian Baker said, the Great Lakes Water Authority will be voting on the water rates on Wednesday. They postponed it from last week, so Wednesday they'll be voting, so Thursday, hopefully we will know what that will be at our One Water Partnership meeting on Thursday. The second thing is, through the 2015 Michigan Invasive Species Grant Program, there are still remaining funds that need to be spent by October of 2018. So with the remaining funds, there is going to be a student in the township. Her name is Allison. She's from Oakland Community College. There'll be no cost to the township because the grant is paying for it. But she will be spending 70 hours just kind of walking our township grounds as well as some of the retention ponds that we maintain just to get accurate measurements on the phragmites in our township. So we're starting the mapping process to see where they're at and how our spraying is going to be helping mitigate that issue. So is there any questions on that?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item 6 is the consent agenda. All items under the consent agenda are considered routine by the board and will be enacted in one motion. There's no separate discussion of these items. If discussion of any item is required by a board member, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Public comments on the consent agenda are permitted. Tonight's consent agenda include item 6A, the approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of June 4th, 2018, approval of the agenda with addendum if necessary, and approval of the payment of bills as submitted by the Finance Department. I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda with an amendment to item 6A, which is the agenda, by removing item 7G, which is an update to the fire code. Do I have support?
Support.
Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by Trustee Joseph. Discussion. From the public. Clerk Niza, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti?
Aye.
Trustee Joseph?
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata?
Aye.
Trustee Anderson?
Aye.
And Trustee Vosper?
Aye.
Motion prevails. 7A, approve the recommendation by the Supervisor's Office to reappoint Tom Yaschen to the Beautification Committee with a term to expire July 1st, 2021. I'll make a motion to approve as stated.
So moved.
Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by Trustee Anderson. I believe Mr. Yaschen was here. I think he left with the presentation. Any discussion? Deputy Clerk Niza, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti?
Aye.
Trustee Anderson?
Aye.
Trustee Joseph?
Aye.
Trustee Vosper?
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata?
7B, motion prevails. 7B, approve the recommendation by the Supervisor's Office to reappoint Wayne Nemeth to the Beautification Committee with a term to expire July 1st, 2021. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion by Trustee Vosper.
Support.
Support by Trustee Joseph. Discussion. Deputy Clerk Niza, please call the roll.
Trustee Vosper?
Aye.
Trustee Joseph?
Aye.
Supervisor Acciavatti?
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata?
Aye.
And Trustee Anderson?
Aye.
Motion prevails. 7C, approve the recommendation by the Supervisor's Office to reappoint John Herzog to the Beautification Committee with a term to expire July 1st, 2021.
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Joseph, support by Trustee Anderson. Deputy Clerk Niza, please call the roll.
Trustee Joseph?
Aye.
Trustee Anderson?
Aye.
Supervisor Acciavatti?
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata?
Aye.
Trustee Vosper.
Aye.
Motion prevails. 7D, approve a request by the Dick's Sporting Goods for an outdoor merchandising application variance for a 20 by 40 foot tent at 50580 Waterside Drive, Chesterfield, Michigan, from June 22nd, 2018 through July 7th, 2018. Business operating from 9 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m.
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Joseph,
Support.
support by Trustee Vosberg. Discussion. You can come up to the board. Petitioner, I believe, is here.
Sorry, I don't know the whole thing. Just the date and the size are wrong on the agenda notes. I don't know if that needed to be adjusted in the minutes, but it is a 20 by 60, and the dates are the 22nd through July 9th. Excuse me, 9th.
That's pretty substantial change.
Deputy Clerk Niza, was the application correct in the agenda item? Or where's the miss?
I have 20 by 40 on the map.
Is this it?
And then 20 by 40 on the letter for Dick's Sporting Goods. That's what we have inside the packet.
Let me see. That's Dick's.
Yeah, 20 by 40.
The application did have 20 by 40 on it. Now would be the time of the motion makers and supporters that want to allow the bigger tent.
I'm not inclined to support or motion a bigger tent with an extended period, especially given the recent tents that we've authorized and the times of sale. So this exceeds our ordinance on two occasions, two areas. One, the size of the tent, and two, the hours, days of operation. Because if I understood the petitioner now, he's looking for 17 days sale and a 1,200 square foot tent. And that's a pretty substantial variance from some of the other vendors, and I think the issue of parity, I don't think I would like to support. So I'll withdraw my motion and leave it to another member of the board.
Mr. Acciavatti,
Yeah,
Supervisor, I know in the past, I can't recall any time that we have amended or extended the days beyond the formula on any of our variances here, votes. Been at 12 days.
Trustee, any further comments from the board? Was that is your motion still on the table, Trustee Joseph, as stated?
Yeah, so I guess it would go to the petitioner. If that satisfies the petitioner's, request, I wouldn't want to take a vote on something that the petitioner was not interested in. So the application, from what I read, requested a 20 by 40 with the dates of sale as outlined in the agenda. That is the motion that I would offer if it meets the petitioner's needs. If it doesn't, then I'll just withdraw the motion.
I don't know, because I was sent here, it's a 20 by 60 tent that we were supposed to be getting, and the dates, the sale goes through the 8th, they're taking it down on the 9th. I don't know if the installation, or the date of taking it down matters. It would actually be one day, but the tent that we were scheduled to get is 20 by 60, so the 20 by 40, it was obviously a mishap by our administrative assistant, but that's not what we're getting, and we wouldn't be able to change that. That's a corporate thing that I have no power over at all. So if that's the case, then yeah.
Do you recall which size tent you used for your
last year? Was 20 by
for
60.
Your last sale?
We had the same size tent last year.
Trustee Vosberg.
Was the time time of use the same?
As far as I know, it was, because it did go through the 4th of July weekend, so it was all the way through the Sunday after 4th of July last year. So as far as the start date goes, I can't exactly recall, but it was, I would say that it was probably, if not the exact same, it was probably the exact same. If I was not, I'm not 100% though.
Because the application I'm reading says June 22 through July 6.
From last year?
No, on this year's application. Unless this is a copy, unless they just made copies from the year before.
That I do not know. I did not submit the application myself. It was our administrative assistant.
The challenge is we have a retail vendor, and I would like to find information on what was approved last year, time frame. Then our next meeting is after your sale is over.
Yeah, I figured that one out, yeah.
We do have a motion still on the table to approve a 20 by 40 tent from June 22nd through July 7th.
Yeah, it is confusing because Dick's is always a very good community partner. They do a lot for us, and they're good neighbors. But the application that's submitted in the letter that's submitted by Andrea Hindman, that's included in our packet, speaks to a 6/22/76 sale date and a 20 by 40 foot tent. So to come forward and ask for additional days, I would be inclined to leave my motion as it is, which is exactly the way it's written in the agenda and the language used by the petitioner. And if that doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But the alternative is, if we don't take action, we don't meet again until this sale is scheduled to be over, and that would leave them in a real trick bag. So I'd be inclined to put the motion forward as requested, with a 20 by 40 for the sale dates that were requested, and ask for continued support.
Trustee Vosberg, you supported the motion.
I'll continue support as stated by Mr. Joseph. But if we're gonna change it, then I would like to look up what was on for last year's request.
Okay.
Does the application say the 6th on there? Does the application say 6th?
I'd like to make a motion to lay item 7D on the table, and we'll revisit it toward the end of the agenda, and when we find last year's application.
Sure.
Is there support? Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by Trustee Joseph, to lay item 7D on the table. Deputy Clerk Nyza, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti?
Aye.
Trustee Joseph?
Aye.
Trustee Anderson?
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg?
Aye.
Treasurer LaFatta?
Aye.
7E, approve a request from Dunham Sports for an outdoor merchandising application variance for a 40-foot by 120-foot tent at 22443 Lake Blvd, Chesterfield, Michigan, 48051, from July 9th, 2018 through July 18th, 2018. Business operating hours from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. I'll make a motion to approve as stated.
Support.
Motion by...
This is a 40 by
This is a-
120.
120 by 40.
This motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by Trustee Anderson.
Big top.
Discussion.
Well, I guess I have just a question.
Is the vendor here? Yes, please.
Where is this really more for our attorney, Mr. Chairman? What do we have here in terms of, I realize that we're going to clear a lot of things up with some ordinance revisions and things, but when we sit and deliberate over 800 square feet and then we go to, tent this size, do we leave the door open for other vendors to come back and say, this is really inconsistent with the, my understanding was the merchandise.
4,800 square feet.
Yeah, 4,800 square feet is a little bit different, so the guys that are selling snakes and sparklers are going to come back and say, hey, you said that, where are we at parity-wise here in terms of, not discriminating on the merchandise, if you will.
Well, as I've said at prior meetings, the law requires you to treat similarly situated people similarly, and these are all outdoor vendors. Now, admittedly, they may have a building within close proximity to the outdoor vending, but they're still outdoor vendors, and they're still selling outdoor merchandise, and there were at least a half a dozen fireworks vendors that were before the board that were held to substantially smaller tent area. I think it's a practical matter. You're not going to see them come back because they're already set to go. But if you don't take some action to get that ordinance fixed, and you get another vendor that comes in here with some other merchandise that may not have a standalone building like these two do, those people are going to have a very good argument that you are treating these people unequally based on the type of merchandise that they're selling, and I think they're going to have a fair point. So.
Well, this is, I mean, there's some wiggle room when you get into, the request is a bit different because the days of sale are different, but
the tent size is
to go
not
from
full.
800 square feet to 4,800 square feet is, it's not even close.
Well, if you would have got a 4,800 square foot request for fireworks, I think it's fair to say it wouldn't have been approved.
We got, well, the one guy wanted 24, we cut him a third, and because we kept consistent with all of the vendors.
Right.
And, again, I do appreciate Dunham's and Dick's in the community sort of give back relationship. They've been good neighbors and good community people, but this is a very tricky issue here. I just don't think I can support it, Mr. Supervisor. Thank you.
Can you give us some history and a little presentation on?
Well, this will be our first tent sale in Chesterfield. We had one last year in Sterling Heights, same size tent, same size area, and it did quite well for us, so they wanted to expand to Chesterfield this year. I don't know if this matters, but the tent's going to be staked in, and then we're going to have an asphalt company come out and patch the holes, so they're actually going to fill them with rubber cement. But it's an exciting event. We're going to sell tons of everything summer. We'll have kayaks out there and just a ton of summer stuff. It'll be good for us. Now, the tent size, I believe the clerk we talked to, and if we need to go smaller, we could. But that's our corporate office. That's the size tent that all the other stores are using. So that's what they wanted us to go for. But if that size is too big, we will go smaller. But as a company, I believe we are doing 25 tent sales this year, and 15 of them are in Michigan, and that's what everyone's using is the 40 by 120.
Will they propose us on?
Before we get put in is there a size that could work that's you could propose?
Well, we'd like it as big as possible. So, I mean, there's anything would work, but we'd like to go as big as possible. We'd rather work with a smaller tent than not be able to do it at all.
Trustee Bosberg.
Thank you. I don't see, did somebody from the township look at the site and say that this would fit there? And if so, where does that show up on the agenda?
I don't believe we had an aerial, like an aerial map that we drew out a spot for and then kind of highlighted where the tent was going to go. And I believe that's what we did.
Already bastardized the days for the first time.
I'll amend my motion to approve the request from Dunham Sports for an outdoor merchandising application variance for a 40-foot by 60-foot tent.
Okay.
Continued support.
And the same dates from July 9th through July 18th from 9 to 9.
Okay.
Amended motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, continued support by Trustee Anderson. Discussion. Deputy Clerk Nyza, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti?
Aye.
Trustee Anderson?
Aye.
Trustee Joseph?
No.
Trustee Vosper.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Motion prevails.
Thank you. Good. Thank you very much.
Back to 7D. I'd like to make a motion to remove 7D from the table.
Yes.
Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti to remove 7D from the table. Is there
Support.
Support by Trustee Vosper. Deputy Clerk Nyza, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Aye.
Trustee Vosper.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Back to 7D, which is approve a request from Dick's Sporting Goods for an outdoor merchandising application variance for a 20-foot by 40-foot tent at 50580 Waterside Drive from June 22nd through July 7th, 2018, Monday through Saturday from 9 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. We do have a motion on the table by Trustee Joseph and support by Trustee Vosberg. For the discussion left off for the 20 by 60 foot tent as requested, and the dates being changed from the 7th to the 9th, I believe. I do have the minutes from last year's board meeting on this exact vendor, and the dates were from June 22nd through July 10th, which I believe was a very similar time frame that probably spanned 2 weekends, and it also was a 20-foot by 60-foot tent.
I'll withdraw my motion and make room for another motion maker.
I understand. Does the supporter have to? Does when you removes the motion, does the supporter have to? I'll make a motion to approve the request from Dick's Sporting Goods for an outdoor merchandising application variance for a 20-foot by 60-foot tent at 50580 Waterside Drive, Chesterfield, Michigan, 58051, from June 22nd, 2018 through July 9th, 2018. Business operating hours Monday through Saturday from 9 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti. Do I have support?
I'll support that.
Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by Trustee Vosberg. Discussion.
Mr. Supervisor?
Trustee Anderson.
So they're requesting it's being amended June 22nd through July the 9th versus July the 7th in their original request, correct? Which exceeds our 12 days.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And the
28 on outdoor merchandising.
line of, or the reference I'm using is last year was June 22nd through July 10th, which this board approved in a 20-foot by 60-foot tent. So the applicants know we are that's an ordinance that we're rewriting, reworking, having work groups on to find the right solution for tent sales from vendors that have bricks and mortar, and also tent sales that for different roadside vendors. So keep an eye on this in the future. Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by Trustee Vosberg. Deputy Clerk Nyza, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata. Trustee Joseph.
No.
7F, approve a request by the Department of Public Works to have High-Tech install a Kantech door panel system at the DPW at a cost of $9,385 with an annual maintenance cost of $300 starting in 2019 from General Ledger 591-441-931. I'll make a motion to approve as stated.
Support.
Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by Trustee Joseph. Assistant Director Johnson.
Just a little bit of background. We've been using a Brevo system through Protection One since 2005 when our building was built. They've been a great vendor, great service. Protection One they did drop the ball a little bit because the Brevo system became obsolete starting in February. Brevo notified them. Protection One did not notify us until April. Well, actually, they didn't. Brevo called us because Protection One never called, or the vendors weren't calling. So Protection One did notify, realized they made this mistake, so they did offer to waive all costs other than actual hardware costs to repair our system. And looking at that, looking at our contracts and such, we are on an annual basis for our contract currently, and we're paying $229 a month for the maintenance of our car door system. So I went out, got a couple more prices for a couple more products, found the Kantech was while the initial cost is going to be a more expensive solution, long-term it'll be less because it's only $300 a year as opposed to $200 a month. So I would like to approve going with Kantech for our system moving forward.
Trustee Joseph.
In terms of, this is more a question for you, Mr. Supervisor, in terms of the sort of procurement process, when it comes to dealing with vendors, I thought we kind of streamlined that so you didn't have, I don't know, this is Mr. Johnson's area of expertise. Like, this is a area that he's proficient in now because he's gone out and, you know, sort of educated himself on. But wouldn't this be more along the lines of our facilities operations department in terms of, because I understand that this comes to us by way of the fire department, so we have, you know, similar systems there. And like, why, I guess my question is, why doesn't Josh come up and submit this, you know, request on behalf of Public Works?
Well, I did speak with Josh and talk with him. He was a part of the process. He was just swamped with other building issues, so I was kind of helping it along and getting a part of that. So, and since I'm familiar with our building and how our process works and ours, I just kind of took the lead on it to get it handled in a quicker manner because he had other issues he was dealing with. But he was involved in the process. I met with him over, you know, the products, and we reviewed the things together to get his thought and process on it as well.
I appreciate the work that you did, Mr. Johnson, and I'm not taking issue with, you know, your efforts here. We have that entity in place because I think, you know, arguably we have, maybe Miss Rose comes in and she says, I know my space and I know my, but does she know folding chairs? Does she know equipment? Does she, like that? Unless I'm out of whack here, I thought Josh was handling those sort of, you know, building issues, procurement issues, IT related, you know, those are infrastructure in my mind, unless I'm wrong here.
Our facilities director, been on board about a year. There's a lot of facilities and properties in the township that have unfortunately just not been maintained and updated. He really has his hands full, and he's in direct communication in that they're housed over in the DPW. I know every discussion is done, and yes, he's involved with it in long term. Yes, every one of these decisions will be presented by the facilities director. In the meantime, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Connington have filled that role for years and years, and discussions have gone on, and I'm not overly concerned that some of the work's getting divvied up, especially when it comes to that specific building.
And it was a quick turnaround because obviously the emergency happened because our doors, basically all our new employees since April can only get in like 2 doors in our building. So it was a quick turnaround, and the goal with this product is it's not a contract-based product. So moving forward, when Josh goes to do a RFP for all the township buildings, we can all be potentially on the same system moving forward, as opposed to me doing a contract long-term. You know, this can be a long-term product, but the goal is eventually it could be all the buildings could merge into one potential system.
Just last follow-up. My issue, I realize it's not a high, you know, extremely high dollar amount, and I know that, you know, the amount of work that you put in. I'm comfortable with this being a good product and a good fit for your building. It is really more of a procedural issue, and when we all have copiers, we all have phones, we all have, no matter, you know, there are some pieces of equipment that are universally utilized throughout. So when you begin to look at, you know, from an operation, this is the discussion we had when we hired Josh, right? This was part of why he comes along and he comes on board. Maybe you just have to make day-to-day decisions from a dollar amount, and this doesn't warrant taking him off a, you know, high dollar project. But for me, when you come into the office and you see, you know, I see the equipment because I used to work at it. The desks that are littering the township office, those are literally desks that were used by case managers that work with me. And their function is to, you know, service clients and manage files, and their case manager desks are not, the clerical pieces of that equipment are somewhere else. That's not clerical equipment. So when you look at procurement, just in terms of, whether it's surplus and we got a great deal on it, or, desks, phones, ID, all of these things we purchase hopefully in bulk. Where I work, you don't have different departments utilizing different equipment and different vendors, and every department head is responsible for procuring all of their, it's just a very fragmented, it leads to very ineffective and inefficient. In this case, you had a problem, you creatively solved it, and it's not a huge capital outlay to correct the problem appropriately, so I'm satisfied individually with this decision. It just isn't consistent with where we want to go, and I realize it's a marathon, not a sprint, and we're headed in that direction. I'm glad to hear that he was involved with this, and just troubling to see department heads coming in and dealing with areas that aren't their area of specialty. So, thank you. Treasurer LaFatta.
Trustee Joseph, in Josh's defense, he's been consumed rearranging the clerk's area.
Oh, well, that big things, I see.
So I'll have to excuse him, but he has been consumed lately.
Oh. Thank you.
Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by Trustee Joseph, to approve the request from Public Works to have High-Tech install Kantech door panel system at DPW for a cost of $9,385. Deputy Clerk Nyza, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti?
Aye.
Trustee Joseph?
Aye.
Trustee Anderson?
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg?
Aye.
Treasurer LaFatta?
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion prevails. 7G has been removed from the agenda via addendum to the consent agenda at the beginning. 7H, a request by the Supervisor's Office for approval from the Board of Trustees to proceed with the posting and submittal of the attached request for bids, instruction to bidders for the Charter Township of Chesterfield single waste hauler collection and disposal contract. I'll make a motion to approve as stated.
Support.
Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by Trustee Vosberg. Discussion.
Just one comment, Mr. Supervisor. I'd like to thank the team for putting this together. It's a pretty big contract and a lot of work, so it looked pretty thorough, and I appreciate the work that's gone into, trying to put this proposal out there. And a little bit saddened with the feedback lately from some of our residents on service. That was one of the selling points of our current vendor, and I think this captures it fairly nicely in terms of making sure we get the right fit. So thanks to the team.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Any further comments from the board? Lots of discussion on this and work, frankly, from a lot of different members and consultants, our attorney, board members, and it's a very important, probably the most important discussion and contract, because our trash collection vendor has more individual contact with our residents on a yearly basis than anybody. Every single week, every single resident, and many times, multiple times. And the details of what that relationship looks like, we as a team have tried to nail what an RFQ should look like, what goes into that qualifications statement and what goes into that vendor selection. We know cost and containers and service, as probably every board member up here knows, especially during the last several months, service has been quite a concern. So I appreciate your comments, and this is going to take some time to put the bids out, analyze the potential vendors, and I look forward to continuing to work with this board to get the right vendor and most importantly the right contract moving forward. Any further comments from the board? From the public? Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by Trustee Vosberg, to approve the request by the Supervisor's Office from the Board of Trustees to proceed with posting and submittal of the request for bids, instruction of bidders for the Charter Township of Chesterfield single waste hauler collection and disposal contract. Deputy Clerk Nyza, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti?
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg?
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata?
Aye.
Trustee Joseph?
Aye.
Trustee Anderson?
Aye.
Motion prevails. 7I, approval of payment to AT&T Mobility in the amount of $3,357.64 for the period 3/18/2018 through 4/17/2018. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
A motion by Trustee Vosberg, support by Supervisor Acciavatti. Discussion. Trustee Vosberg.
I made the motion to approve it so we could get it on the floor. It shows the amount per phone with a total, but it doesn't show if the credits that we were supposed to have received came in. So have we received those credits, some of the credits?
Clerk Barry, who is heading up this vendor relationship, is not here. We did discuss this at the last several board meetings. I am comfortable with the pattern last year with the same vendor where the credits took some time to come through. We have been told that those credits will come through just like last year, and you will see some $0 bills. They are not through on this bill as of now, and I believe Treasurer LaFata is very in tune as to the issues with this bill.
One of the issues is finance can only pay the amount on the invoice. The invoice amount's not correct. So basically, I can't approve it. But if the board wishes to have it paid with the consent of the board, I guess we'll approve it. It's been 6 months since we've had this service, and there's been some questions that we posed to AT&T that they haven't answered yet. And one of the things was credits and why our services keep changing. 1 month, the service will be $40, and the next month it's $20. There's a credit for $15, there's a credit for $25. We don't know if those credits are because of all the overpayments we've made or some kind of incentives. It still hasn't been solidified.
Trustee Joseph.
Mr. Supervisor, I think the issue that both Trustee Vosberg and Treasurer LaFata raised are where are the credits? And I know you can't answer this. This is Clerk Barry's issue, but where are the credits? And the other thing is the number that I put on this was we were hovering near $40,000, and I asked who authorized that relationship. Clerk Barry assured me that we were not at a $40,000 amount, that the monthly fees were consistent with what happens when you have an uptick in new equipment and you get the initial charges because there's sort of some buybacks, but that the rate, the monthly rate would then go back to something similar to what we had under the previous. They're not, and that's before you get to the credits. Before it gets real ugly tonight, I'd like to make a motion that we table this and allow Clerk Barry to explain what we have in the way of credits, and would ask that we table this until our next meeting on July 9th.
Motion by Trustee Joseph to table item 7I. Is there support?
Support.
Motion by Trustee Joseph, support by Treasurer LaFata to table item 7I to the July, or our next meeting.
That is July 9th? Am I right on that, or?
It's our next schedule.
Yes, next scheduled meeting, July 9th?
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. I'm not sure if Deputy Clerk Nyza will be able to answer this. Is there a potential shut-off between now and July 9th?
I would have to give them a call. I know it's due. There was some credits that did come through based on the fact we pay on the invoice. That's what we're basically kind of overpaying this and trying to come to a solution with their corporate office that's got involved now.
Any further discussion from the board?
Mr. Supervisor, is that the corporate office or the vendor as far as?
Corporate office is involved.
Of the vendor?
Correct.
Not AT&T?
AT&T's corporate office,
Okay.
not the 23-mile road
Okay.
location, correct?
Thank you. Thank you.
Motion to table by trustee Joseph. Support by trustee Anderson. Oh, I'm sorry, treasurer Lafado. Deputy Clerk Nyza, please call the roll.
Trustee Joseph?
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata?
Aye.
Trustee Anderson?
Aye.
Trustee Vosper?
No.
And Supervisor Acciavatti?
No. Motion prevails, 7 ayes. Postpone until the next meeting. 7J, approve request by the clerk's office for the payment of annual dues to the Michigan Townships Association, MTA, for the period of July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019, in the amount of $6,738.26, including legal defense, from GL 101-248-928. I'll make a motion to approve as stated.
Support.
Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by trustee Anderson. MTA is a tremendous asset and organization to not only our township, but many and most townships in Michigan. Any discussion? Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by trustee Anderson. Deputy Clerk Nyza, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti?
Aye.
Trustee Anderson?
Aye.
Trustee Vosper?
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata?
Aye.
Trustee Joseph?
Aye.
Motion prevails. 7K, approve a contract with the City of New Baltimore for 911 dispatch services. Director Kirsten. Oh, I'll make a motion to approve as stated.
Support.
Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by trustee Joseph.
This is a historical document that we've dealt with the city of New Baltimore regarding our 911 police and fire dispatch services for them. The original author was our township attorney. It was reviewed by him, originally created by him, and then reviewed when we sat down to negotiate the price increases that are mentioned in the document. One of the goals that we wanted to do when we sat down with them was increase our costs, which we did do in a longer term of the contract, which takes us now to 2022, and it achieves our financial goal that we had set out. Other than that, there really isn't any language changes within the agreement. I defer to the township counselor to address any questions. It was forwarded to him and approved in the final draft as presented to you today.
There are no substantive changes to the agreement that's before you now than the prior agreement that was approved. The only changes are the financial.
Trustee Vosper.
Thank you. In the report, your annual report, you cite in there the number of calls, emergency calls and non-emergency. Does that include what's the New Baltimore calls?
Yes, it does. With the enhancements of the technology, though, that some of those you'll see that they might have been underreported, and we have historically underreported the activity in there. We've gotten better with the other technology areas that we've invested in, and that was one of the reasons for the increase in fee that we requested from them.
Okay. And if you can't answer this because you don't have the data to do it, I don't guess, but if we didn't do this service for them, would we still utilize the same number of dispatchers at every shift?
I would say no. There would be a reduction in staff. Okay. You're roughly removing 33% of our call volume.
Okay, thank you. 33%?
Any further comments from trustee Anderson?
That's a 5-year contract, I believe, with New Baltimore? Is that 5 years?
Yes.
Okay. And I mean, they're bound by it, 5 years?
Correct.
Thank you. Can't take off and go with the share.
Trustee Joseph.
So that's a big number. I hadn't heard that before, Chief. So I was sort of operating in the idea that we have a certain cost associated with running dispatch. New Baltimore calls come in. We service that with minimal impact on our obligation to Chesterfield residents. That we're in a position to provide a service that, I mean, I've never known it to make a lot of money. It's part of being a good partner with New Baltimore, but you're saying roughly a third. What would be your estimate in terms of, there has to have been some cost-benefit analysis on the dispatch as it relates to New Baltimore. So what would you do differently if you didn't have New Baltimore with regard to staffing? Because don't you run into situations with dispatch where you need to call people in and you're paying, like how would you reduce your dispatch? Because it's really the first time I'd heard that.
We would have to do the further analytics of it, but based on the call volume, as you see in your monthly reports, the only way I would approach it would be based on time. You'll see at 4 in the morning where we have 2 dispatchers staffed 24/7. We would look at a window of where we would reduce that staffing number to maybe just be 1 dispatcher.
I guess my question is so the dispatcher that's on duty, as I've understood it, they're going to be there answering calls from Chesterfield residents who are in need. The bringing on board of New Baltimore just makes potentially their work a little busier. You're not able to reduce significant man hours if we did not service New Baltimore.
That's correct.
Is that a fair
That would be fair
understanding?
to say, yes.
So you're generally going to outfit the same staffing levels, maybe a shift or 2 here or there would be the difference?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Boswell.
Yeah, so just for clarification, then, you said a third of the calls, but that wouldn't reduce our, if we didn't do that for them, there's no way we could reduce our cost by 1/3.
It would be limited.
Because of the fact that you need to have
If I
certain-
misunderstood your question, yes. We wouldn't be able to reduce that substantially in that area. You still have to have it
But you
staffed.
still need the staffing, whether.
Still got to be prepared for that emergency.
Treasurer LaFata.
Thank you.
Actually, what it does is the fee that we charge New Baltimore helps us in the absorption of our current costs for equipment, housing, everything else. Without that, it's not going to offset the IT equipment, the facility, and everything else we have.
Thank you, Treasurer LaFata. I think this is a great example of what local governments should be doing and what a lot of the residents expect us to do, frankly. And in the conversation, I think went a little sideways with maybe a miscommunication. Yes, there's an additional cost, additional burden for a municipality like ours to take on New Baltimore. However, the synergies, you're still going to have desktops, computers, equipment, servers, personnel, and the processes. Therefore, I am very, very confident that the synergy with our partner and our friend in New Baltimore in this is a win-win for both of us. And I am also looking for more of it, frankly, with us in New Baltimore. And I think this is just a good example of how we can, as local governments. It seems like there's a lot of kingdoms and territory wars, but at the end of the day, residents don't necessarily care about that. You put New Baltimore on my house residence, or Chesterfield, it still ends up at my house, and a lot of folks don't really see the difference. So this is a contract, that extension that I'm very well supportive, and if anything, I'm looking to push this relationship a little bit further when appropriate.
Oh, sure. Just for Trustee Anderson, you had asked whether or not this is a 5-year agreement and they could not go to a third party for dispatch. There is a 3-month window here. Either side can notify the other side within 3 months in writing of a termination. We could do the same to them. You simply have to perform for that 3-month period. So if during this 5-year agreement, if for whatever reason we became overburdened, we could notify them, and 3 months later, they're no longer getting the service from us, and similarly, they could notify us. So it's not a 5-year for certain lock. Either side can walk. You got to give notice, but at the end of that 3-month period, we no longer provide the service to them.
Thank you.
There's no downside to us, but to clarify that point.
Thank you.
Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by Trustee Joseph, to approve the contract with the City of New Baltimore for 911 dispatch services. Deputy Clerk Nysa, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti?
Aye.
Trustee Joseph?
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata?
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg?
Aye.
Trustee Anderson?
All right.
Motion prevails.
Thank you.
No addendum tonight, so move on to item number 9, public comment. If you wish to address the board, please state your name and address at the microphone and limit your comments to 5 minutes.
My name is Joe Kadich. I live on Sutton. I'm here tonight, if most of you weren't sleeping at some of the meetings when I've talked against spraying the Phragmites with the Roundup. I did it before you sprayed the Salt River, and again when you had the motion to do the Fish Creek. I've lived in this house for 30 years. I live across from the marsh that's supposed to be enlarged and dredged as part of the enhancement of the river. Every year since I've been there, across the marsh from me, there's 2 swans that always come in there and mate. They were there this year. Usually they build a nest, the female stays on the nest, the male travels back and forth in front of the area, keeping out intruders and that. That happened this year. At the same time, what usually happens about the first part of June is they come out with their cygnets. And every year since I've been there, there's always been between 3 and 6. This year, nobody's appeared with any cygnets. The other thing my neighbors and I have been talking about is there's no ducks. We always have duck families. I've seen one duck family with one duck that had probably about 5 ducklings. There's usually probably a dozen or so on the river. That hasn't occurred this year. The only difference this year between last year is the Phragmites spraying. Now, it worked on the Phragmites, they're all dead. They've not been cut down yet. But I don't know what caused all of this problems that we don't have any cygnets, we don't have any ducks. And I think you guys should look at, again, spraying what you're going to spray on the Fish Creek. When I told you, I think initially, when I talked to the Michigan EPA, went through it, they look at the federal guidelines. And that's what they do. They also do not do any follow-up. They don't do any postmortems. They just assume that whatever's done is okay. I don't think that's right. And the other thing is when at the end of the conversation with the EPA guy from Michigan, he told me also that they use this on a lot of crops. He also told me, that's why I eat only organic. Now, you got an EPA agent that's telling you he doesn't probably like the guidelines that this stuff is being applied with, and so he's doing it on his own, but he's not doing his job in protecting the public. I think you should get into this a little bit. I'm going to go out and I'll see if I can find the nest, see if there's just unhatched eggs or what happened there, but something really changed this year. And I don't want you to keep on applying this stuff if this is doing something to the wildlife in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kadich. Any further public comment?
Hey, how's everybody doing tonight? Good, good. I know it's a good thing we talked about drainage tonight, especially because it looks like we're going to need an arc outside soon. One of the things I wanted to talk about was I remember back at the end of last year, I had asked each and every one of you, and people in the audience as well, about personal and public goals to accomplish throughout the year. And as we're nearing the half-year mark, and we're probably not going to be meeting until after that point, I just wanted to see if anyone has any progress or any things they'd like to say about what they've accomplished for the township and for themselves personally, as it's important that we make goals for ourselves and continue to strive for them and for others as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public? Bring it up to the board. Trustee Joseph.
I guess I'll start with the last comment. I remember the request for feedback on resolutions, and I was hoping personally to get some weight off this year. Unfortunately, I went to a ball game with Chief Kirsten, and he's very, very bad influence on me. So we did not have light beer, and there was a lot of hot dogs, so it's not going good. That's the short answer there. But I do blame Chief Kirsten for that. Mr. Kadich, I appreciate your comments, and it was your comments that had me sort of digging a little deeper. There was a lot of debate, and I was troubled with an area that you pointed out then, and you referenced it now. Township looks to DEQ, DEQ looks to EPA, EPA looks to the federal guidelines, and you wonder how much independent research happens along the way, or is it just one fact-finding entity and then everyone down the chain rubber stamps it? I don't know, and I'm not a chemist and I'm not an engineer, but I do see a trend, and the trend is we are very comfortable with the spraying. Well, I don't know, very comfortable is maybe an overstretch, but comfortable enough to vote in the affirmative for that being a mechanism to remove these Phragmites. I believe they're a problem from an environmental standpoint. I do believe, I did conclude, I think in my mind, they are problematic, and you know, an eradication program has to be in place. It is an invasive species that is doing some damage to the natural ecosystem. It wasn't intended to be here, and by definition, an invasive species is problematic. The question becomes, what's the best mechanism for removing it? And unfortunately, I think we confuse best with most cost-effective. So it seems to me, in a pattern that's been adopted in many municipalities, more than just ours, that mechanism is the economic. So economically, it's more viable to use the sprays because the other methods are much more costly. They involve man hours, and you have to physically get out and expend time and energy to, you know, cut down, remove, and it gets kind of expensive. And when you compare that expense with an expense which may show up 2 decades from now, you can see why the trend would be likely to go with spraying. I just don't want to be part of something 10, 15, 20 years from now when they look back. And so I had a real hard time with it, and I voted against the spraying, not because I don't think Phragmites are a problem, it's just this method of extraction. We're getting too reliant on it. I agree with you. We do have to investigate. And if you're not comfortable doing the investigative work, then maybe the investigative work on what it would cost for another method, and bring that as a proposal for eliminating these Phragmites. So I'm troubled by it too, but I know that you know, people do their own research and and they make a decision. These are tough calls. I don't know the pointers and the things that you're talking about are unique to you because you live at that property and you see certain things that aren't happening. I don't know, you know, cause, and I just have a real hard time with the pattern of increased spraying. So it's why I voted against it last go around. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and it's a couple of things that are more horizon related, and that is the presentation we got from Commissioner Miller and her team. Most of my research and most of the time I spent formulating sort of some questions had to do with this being a mid property, that this was something that was owned by the collective. And so in my mind, I was thinking when we had the catastrophe at 15 Mile, we didn't say, well, Fraser, it looks like you have a real problem on your hands, because that's part of a infrastructure that we all collectively share, which is the birth of the mid, right? We communally sort of take responsibility independent of where the equipment physically is underground. What's different here, and what our residents should probably get comfortable with, is this is not part of that sort of fleet of assets, I guess. This is an independently owned, well, should be, by the township. We own it, we're responsible for it, just like any other piece of infrastructure. So that's a game changer for me. As I said, I hadn't heard that before. All of the invoices and things that I went over with Mr. LaFata, and you look at month after month, residents pay for infrastructure. Infrastructure depreciation is part of your bill. Why do we have a piece of infrastructure that is just literally falling apart and never appears? Category 4s and 5s, as we heard today. So that's an unfortunate discussion that we need to have, and financing that and making the determination about what pieces we target. Do we do the whole line? Do we do, as the Drain Commissioner suggested, maybe look at the most critical and make an assessment? But time is not on our side is the other thing that I heard in that presentation. Time is definitely not on our side, and we need to make that decision fairly rapidly. Last, I just wanted to apologize. I don't know if Mr. Johnson's still here. You know, giving you a hard time about the, and I should have just, I noticed Treasurer LaFata had something to input, and I should have stopped and just listened to him, but this, what's taking time away from normal operations is just becoming a pandemic. It seems to happen over and over and over again. I'll wait for Clerk Berry to return. It's not really fair to address these when she's not here, but coming in and seeing this office equipment, surplus office equipment, which I personally recognize for a purpose that is so far away from the intended use of the manufacturer, and seeing it take such a wide space, and hearing employees who are wondering if they're going to be relocated. I mean, how big does the footprint of the clerk's office intend to get? It seems that there is an insatiable appetite for growth there, and it goes unregulated and unchecked, and it's really come to an end, in my opinion. We're involved in these massive parties in the park. We have phone bills, we have copiers, we have records that don't belong to the clerk that are being commandeered under the long arm of the clerk, and it's become quite ridiculous. And I would like to see her here more so that I could talk to her about it, but I'll save the balance for when she returns. But Mr. Supervisor, it's becoming quite ridiculous, and I know that you're an elected official, as we all are, and somewhat autonomous from one another, but the day-to-day operations rest with you, and we're putting together a good team to look at some of these procurements of contracts, and I would like to see those offices be able to do what they were intended to do, instead of rushing over to take care of surplus equipment and figure out who's got to be moved. And it's a gross mismanagement of what we put together as a plan, and I think you laid out very nicely. I really want Josh on top of the building, look at ventilation systems and security systems, and the procurement of the things we all need, not putting out fires. Put him on Chief Kirsten's staff. He's going to be putting out fires all day. It's quite ridiculous, and the clerk needs to really dial this back, and I'll save the balance of my real disappointment for when she returns. But it's clearly something needs to be done, and soon. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. And Mr. Kadich, you brought up some interesting points. You're talking about the lack of foul out there in the Salt River and that. Perhaps if this phragmite problem had more to do with global warming, there might be more attention to it. There's a book about 50-plus years old, a lady called Rachel Carson wrote it, called The Silent Spring. And it caused the powers that be to take a look at the miracle insecticide, whatever it is, called DDT, and what effect it had on eagles and people and everything else. Mr. Joseph hit that topic, and I appreciate it, and I share the same feeling, and a couple of meetings ago I said the same thing. Back in Vietnam, I'm not a veteran of Vietnam, but knowing people that are passing on a regular basis in our age group that were over there, and are at Agent Orange over there, which, don't worry about it. Veterans dropping right and left. And what are we spraying out there? What are they spraying? Please keep it up. The other thing, residents of the township and elsewhere, you only have 7 vendors that purchase your explosives for the 4th of July in our fine township here within a proximity of 23 Mile Road in Gratiot, so watch the traffic. Our next meeting won't be until July the 9th, so I hope everyone has a safe and productive 4th of July. Thank you.
Trustee Rosberg. Trustee Vosberg.
Thank you. Congratulations again to Police Officer Calendra for starting his career here with us. Appreciate that. And I also want to just speak about Phragmites, but in a little different perspective. I appreciate the information that was shared tonight, and we need to keep looking at that. But another thing that I would like to see us continue to do, even though sometimes we don't need to, we need to kill it, but maybe we don't need to spray it all. But the unsightliness of it, I would like to see our residents taking more authority over some of the growth of that, especially when it's in their yards. And it's kind of, I notice in some places it's growing up the bank from the ditch up onto their property. So we'll just keep working at it, but we need to, I would like to see us reduce the amount of Phragmites so that we don't, when we drive down Jefferson and 21 Mile, it doesn't seem like we're driving through a tunnel. Thank you.
Treasurer LaFata.
I'd like to thank Mr. Kadish for his concern for the wildlife. There's must be something we can do to find out if it's the chemicals that are used to kill them that it's affecting the wildlife. The other issue on the $1.7 million repair, it's kind of confusing to understand that we have an asset that we're really not managing ourselves, and we all of a sudden find out that it's an ill repair. That's kind of confusing to me, because I think if we had that asset and it was ours, when we had our SAW grant, we would have known that it would have needed repair, and we would have, you know, we'd have put it in the budget appropriately to do something about it. That's the only confusing part. We have an asset, but it seems like the county was actually, I don't know, maintaining it or running it or something, because they must have, if they used their SAW grant to look and see how it was maintained. That's about all.
I have a couple quick comments. One, I'm really encouraged by the conversation with Commissioner Miller on that asset. Lots of work on the details of it, and it highlights decisions that are made decades and decades ago, whether it's investing in infrastructure or documents that are signed, contracts to transfer that infrastructure, in this instance from the county to us. A lot of time's gone by from 2003 till now. It took this board, you know, we gotta untie these loose ends. And it's not like that's the only one that needs to be untied. It seems like there's a lot of them here. The old DPW building, that's a facility that needs to be analyzed. The youth center, a lot of them. Segue into Seville Manor, a site that you're going to start seeing some news on, in that there was a public hearing tonight that coincided with this meeting at the library, an environmental assessment public hearing that is required when a federal piece of property is being transferred or developed. In this instance, the prospective use for Seville Manor, which is a vital piece of property in our community due to its strategic location and its natural beauty, frankly. There's a bald eagle on that piece of property. The prospective user, as of right now, and it is just prospective, is the State of Michigan Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, that is in concept looking at a preliminary veterans home. And there's some information on that that was shared at the public hearing and some articles in the newspaper. Nothing, it is just preliminary and it is just potential. And in the coming months, 30 to 45 days, I'm expecting we start hearing a whole lot more about that process if the state of Michigan continues to move forward. Another quick comment on Macomb County is celebrating its bicentennial, its 200-year celebration, and this week the Executive Hackle is doing a torch run through all 27 Macomb County communities, It'll start Thursday morning at 5-something in the morning in Mount Clemens, and it'll end late Friday night in Mount Clemens, and Chesterfield has a leg in that. We have approximately 6 miles through our township, which the torch will be ran through, and that'll be from Thursday morning from approximately 9 o'clock until 11 o'clock when it gets handed off in New Baltimore. Trustee Anderson did allude to the fact that our next meeting is not the first Monday in July, it is the 2nd, so it's July 9th. And due to 4th of July and Independence Day, have a safe 4th of July and Independence Day due to the fact that we will not be here. Then be safe out there. The heat right now is ridiculous. And be safe with those commercial fireworks that are going off, and use them responsibly. Thank you so much. With that, we'll move on to item number 11, which is the closed session. Discussion regarding strategy and negotiation sessions pursuant to Section 8C of the Open Meetings Act. I'll make a motion to go into closed session.
Support.
Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by Trustee Joseph. Deputy Clerk Niza, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti?
Aye.
Trustee Joseph?
Aye.
Trustee Anderson?
Aye.
Trustee Vosper?
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata?
Aye.
Motion prevails. We are in closed session at 9:10. Motion to re-enter open session.
Support.
Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by Trustee Anderson to re-enter open session. Deputy Clerk Niza, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti?
Aye.
Trustee Anderson? Trustee Joseph?
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata? And Trustee Vosper?
Aye.
We are back in open session at 9:23 p.m. Motion to adjourn by Trustee Joseph?
Yes.
Support by Trustee Anderson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?